This presentation will be a salary comparison between preschool, special education, itinerant teachers, and public school teachers in Westchester County, New York. Disclosures: I own and operate a preschool special education program in Westchester County. Therefore, I have a direct financial interest in program funding. Objectives: try to give an apples to apples salary comparison between the preschool SEIT teachers and K through 12 public school teachers. And in so doing, I hope to highlight the wage disparity between these two classes of New York State certified teachers. Then I'll give my ideas as to why this has happened. And finally, I'll make some suggestions to elected officials on how to fix this. So SEIT, Special Education Itinerant Teacher. These are special education teachers who travel around the community to work with preschoolers who have been identified by their local public school district as in need of special education services. So these SEIT teachers go to daycares and preschools and sometimes children's homes to work with them. The system is a patchwork of providers who are approved by the New York State Education Department to provide these services. The funding for this program is set by the New York State Education Department and subject to the approval of the director of the budget, which essentially means that funding for the program is determined by the director of the Division of Budget. It is a fee-for-service program. So if a child is absent due to illness, or a teacher, the SEIT teacher is absent due to illness, or the school is closed due to a snowstorm, we cannot bill. This stands in contrast to a tuition-based program. So we have the preschooler with a disability, parent, and the daycare or preschool. This is the constellation of need that the SEIT, special education preschool teacher, supports. This is where the work is done. The school district, as I mentioned earlier, makes the determination as to the eligibility for services based on evaluations that are done. It's not something we do, but some agencies do that as well. So they review evaluations, make the determination that the child is in need. The school district develops a program, an educational program with goals for the child. And then they find an approved provider, such as our company, to provide the SEIT, the Division of Budget, and the State Education Department. They have programmatic and fiscal oversight responsibility. The County Department of Health is the pay source in the first instance. So we provide the services and then we seek reimbursement from the County Department of Health using a rate provided to Westchester County from the Division of Budget and the State Education Department. This is really the body that provides the financial and programmatic oversight and authorization to the agency. And I just put this dollar to show that the money comes from here. The county pays us, and then the county gets reimbursed about half the cost from the state. The federal government provides the legal framework, and they provide funding. Some of that funding will flow through from the Fed to the State Education Department to the school district, and then on to the SEIT provider. We will account for that in this model. We have to account for that grant money that comes in. And then you have New York State elected officials who provide the legal framework for how the program is administered and how much money will go. So they are the ones, for example, that put that 10-word phrase into the law. That means all financial decisions are subject to the approval of the director of the Division of Budget. That is part of the state legal framework. I just wanted to point one thing out here that I think is important in terms of collective bargaining and access to the New York State retirement system, New York State pensions. Most of the employees in school district, employees at the state and at the county, all have access to collective bargaining, to unions and retirement, New York State retirement and pensions. In fact, New York State elected officials, while they're not part of a union, they have access to a pension provided by the taxpayers of the state of New York. A good pension. New York State retirement system is very good. However, over here, the SEIT teachers who provide the service have been barred from this. So let's start here by calculating the maximum 10-month salary that we could provide to a SEIT teacher. One thing about a fee-for-service system is that it makes it easy to determine the maximum revenue that a SEIT teacher could generate. So we're going to start by figuring that out. That will, once we know what the maximum revenue potential is for a SEIT teacher, we can use that as a limiter on salary, that becomes a limiter on the salary. So let's figure that out. We're going to go with 5 billable hours per day. That's comparable, right? This is an apples to apples comparison to a public school teacher. If it's a 35-hour work week, then the other 2 hours a day are used for prep, or in the case of a SEIT teacher, driving around. Billable days in a year, 180. This is set by the state. This is a 10-month salary comparison. So we're looking at September through June, 180 days in the year. So then we can figure out the maximum number of billable hours just by multiplying the hours per day by the number of days in the year, 900. That is a hard number to hit, but we'll start there. We're now going to deduct 5% for student absences. Remember, unlike a tuition-based program, if a student is absent and we're unable to make up the service, we cannot bill for it. We do not get reimbursed for it. So we have to deduct student absences that we will not be able to make up. So we deduct that, and billable hours drops to 855. Also, in keeping with an apples to apples comparison, we're going to deduct 5 days for teacher absences. But again, unlike the public school or a tuition-based program, since this is fee for service, if a teacher is absent and not able to make the session up, then we will not collect any revenue for those missed days. So we deduct that, and we get maximum number of billable hours in a 10-month year of 830 hours for a SEIT teacher. So then the reimbursement rate set by New York State, or the proposed rate for 2022-2023, is $94 an hour. So we can just multiply $94 an hour by 830 hours, and that gives us a revenue potential from the direct source, billing source, of $78,000. I mentioned earlier that we will get some flow-through grant money on a per pupil basis. That's estimated at about $7,500. So when you add those two together, you get a maximum revenue potential of around $86,000. Remember, this is a revenue potential. This $94 an hour is not the pay rate to the teacher. This has to cover all the costs to the agency. So let's account for the other costs that have to come out of that revenue. And we're going to do it in relation to a salary model. And that's because most of the costs are a function of the salary. So we kind of have to play around to back into the max salary that we could get. So I do a little bit of modeling, but I did that already. And what you come up with is about $62,000. And let me show you the costs that are tied to that are a function of that. And then you'll see how, when you add those together, we get back to that maximum revenue. So Social Security, Medicare, these are the costs, mandatory costs that we have to pick up. Unemployment insurance, workers' compensation and professional liability, the cost to administer the program. So this includes processing payroll, seeking reimbursement from the county, managing the grants, managing the independent annual audit that has to be done, providing clinical support to the SEIT teachers in the field, any rent, utilities, materials, supplies, all of those costs are admin, and they're estimated to be about 10%. This might fluctuate a little bit between 8 and 12%, but this is a reasonable estimate. Health insurance, we did it based on the New York State insurance market for one person. And so that was that number. And we factored in retirement. This is probably not comparable to what state employees, county employees, school district employees, and elected officials will get through the New York State pension, but it's a number. We did that. When you add all those together, you get about $24,000. We add that to the salary that we modeled, and you get $85,520. That was the max revenue that we had on the previous slide. So that means about $62,000 is the max salary if the state comes through with the increase that they have proposed for the upcoming year. I want to make a couple of points here, though. So as inflation goes up, it drives up these costs. For example, New York State borrowed billions of dollars from the federal government to cover its unemployment insurance needs. The state has to pay that money back to the federal government with insurance, with interest. That cost is paid by small businesses, and large is paid by the businesses in the community. So that these numbers will go up. Any costs like rent, utilities, we don't control the costs there. The price of paper, we don't control any of those costs. So if inflation rises and the cost of goods goes up, it's going to drive all these costs up. This is one to highlight the costs of health insurance. Insurance providers in New York State have just asked the New York State regulator to increase in the premiums in the small business and individual market by 19% in the coming year. They're not likely to get that, but they might get half of that. And that means this cost will go up. So all of these costs are likely to go up because it's a cost reimbursement program, right? It's a fee for service program. They will reimburse us. If the amount that the state is reimbursing us does not go up as inflation goes up, then that means the pay that we can give to a SEIT teacher is driven down, right? And historically, this has been one of the ways that the state has steeply underfunded this program, as by not having cost of living adjustments to account for inflation built into the way funding determinations are made. So we come then to how do we determine the salary for the K through 12 public school teacher in Westchester County? To start, I'm going to go to an article from Low HUD in 2016. What they found was in 2015-16, the average 10-month salary for a public school teacher in Westchester County was $92,550. To bring that closer to an apples to apples comparison, I trended that forward with inflation to 2021 using the consumer price index for our region. And you get to about $103,000 for a 10-month public school teacher salary in Westchester County. So let's take stock of where we are. Let's do a little comparison, run down some points on this. New York State certified teacher. Yes, the same credentials are required for both of these classes of teachers. Teach public school children. Yes. The eligibility determination, all the goals are determined by the public school, and these are public school children. Collective bargaining, importantly, no. Access to the New York State retirement system, no. That could be done. It's been proposed in the past, but these teachers have been locked out of the New York State retirement system, where K through 12 and county, state employees and elected officials all have access to the retirement system. And how are funding determinations made? K through 12, local control. The majority of it is through a budget crafted by the Board of Education in the local school district with the superintendent and business officials there. That budget is put out to the local taxpayers to vote on. The preschool SEIT, no, it's controlled largely by the director of the Division of Budget with recommendations from the state education department. They control the funding for the preschool system. And the average salary for 2021-22 for the K through 12 Westchester County teacher, 103. The maximum salary for 22-23 that's proposed based on a rate that the state is saying they're going to give us is $62,000. So bottom line is Westchester preschool special education max in 2022 is $41,000 less than the average K through 12 in 2021-22. That is a pretty wide gap. So let's start up here. Up here we have this path is the K through 12 10-month. You can see this is back in 2016. That was the number from that low HUD gave as the average. We trended it forward to keep pace with inflation. And that's how we got to this 103 right here. Okay, so that's the K through 12 10-month average. This path here, this is a hypothetical path. And what I did here was I took the rate and methodology in place in 2009, which is when we first got approval and entered the market. And at that time, I thought the rate and methodology was reasonable, which is why I sought approval to do it, because I thought it was reasonable and the program was workable. I took that number and I just trended it forward, tied it to the consumer price index. You can see right here, actually, inflation was a negative. So that's why this drops. But I trended it forward and then I added here this last leg from 2021 to 2022 is this includes the proposed increase from the state. Over this past year. And you see, if they just left things the way they were in 2009 and said there's going to be a standard cost of living adjustment each year, while we're still behind the K through 12, we're much closer, especially with this increase that the state is proposing for 2022-23. This next path here is similar to the other one. I started in 2015, and you'll see why I use this in a second. But we started 2015 and then just tie it, make a cost of living adjustment based on the consumer price index each year. And we get through here. And here I didn't even factor in this rate increase here. I just kept it stable here. If we added that, it would bump it up somewhere in here. Next, we see this green dot. Okay, this green dot is what the preschool SEIT agencies in New York City and Long Island will get in 2022-23 is this rate. Okay, that's where they will be. You can see they're far behind too. But now we're going to look at what the actual SEIT rate is. Okay, this is the Westchester actual SEIT rate. Okay, and you can see this is why I took 2015. This was a big point of departure for the program. You can see back in 2015 it was here. And then a series of devastating cuts, a change in methodology occur and drove us down here. And this shows you the gap here between the proposed rate from the state for us in 2022 and the actual rate for the K through 12. That's that $41,000 gap right there. Now, this is important here. This gap is a mystery to me. Why Westchester has been put into a different economic zone from New York City and Long Island. Nobody could reasonably argue that the cost of living in Westchester County is below the cost of living in New York City and Long Island. And what's worse is that Westchester County, when agencies from New York City and Long Island come in and do business with Westchester County and contract with the Westchester County Department of Health, the Westchester County Department of Health pays them this rate here, where they'll pay us this rate here, or right now we're getting paid here. This is what we're proposed to get. We're getting paid here. Why this happened is because the rate setting unit of the New York State Education Department, they produced this rate methodology study in 2014. And based on that study, these cuts were made to the SEIT program. This was done over my loud vocal protest. I was, very upset by this. And the reason why is because I could predict what was going to happen to the program when they instituted these cuts. And this is the result. I don't think that there's any question about the gap. I think it speaks for itself what this means. And so what are the consequences of this massive wage disparity? Well, you can't recruit and retain qualified preschool SEITs. And since we can't recruit, preschoolers don't get the recommended services because the state has crippled funding for the program. And of course, this has long-term social and financial costs to all of us. Kids who don't receive these services are susceptible to more challenges when they enter the K through 12 program, and that can alter the course of their life. And if they end up requiring more services K through 12, perhaps services when they get out of the K through 12 system, those financial costs are borne by all of us. So why did this happen? New York State put out this methodology study in 2014. And that was really the mechanism that they used to justify the massive cuts. And the reason they did it was, I believe it was payback for bad actors. And here's an article from 2012 you can read about. There were bad actors in the system who were taking money and not providing services. They subsequently got caught through audits from the state comptroller, and newspapers started publishing articles about it, and it made the state look very bad, that they were, incompetent in their ability to administer this program. The problem, though, with doing the cut is that, it overshot, right? So the way to deal with bad actors is not to punish the entire field, right? It wasn't that the children didn't need the money to provide services. It was that people were stealing that money. So the state took once they were embarrassed, they decided to do this methodology, and they had what we could call a confirmation bias. And that is, they had a theory, we want to cut the rates. And so they had to come up with the evidence to do that. So it's what you might call a theory in search of evidence, or a theory in search of data. And as a result, the methodology, and I put this in quotes, study, because it was not, it was terrible research, but it was sort of used as the basis to institute cuts. And I believe it was done largely because the state was embarrassed by these bad actors. Second reason why, well, we have the director of the Division of Budget calling the shots. I think if this is going to be the way things are going forward, then the director of the Division of Budget ought to be required to publicly answer for decisions that are made to not provide cost of living adjustments, to not provide a funding system that's rational and equitable with other teachers, public school teachers. And the biggest reason why this is that it's not part of the K through 12 system, right? If pre-K was a full member of the K through 12 system, then these teachers would be part of the union, part of collective bargaining, and the funding would come through local property taxes, not through decisions made by state ed and the director of the budget enacting a legal framework put together by elected officials. When election time comes up, politicians love to trot out how they are champions of children with special needs. I think, at least here in Westchester County, it would be very, very difficult to make that claim. Or if that's what that graph I just showed you, if that represents being a champion, well, boy, that's a sad state of affairs. So here are my suggestions then for elected officials representing Westchester County. And there's two groups here. There are the county reps, the George Latimer, who's the executive of the county. I live in Mount Vernon, so Tyree Woodson Samuels. Vidik Gashi, I saw him at an autism event in Mount Vernon a few weeks back. These are the county officials, and then state people. We've got some muscle in the Senate. And Majority Leader Stuart Cousins, and then we have Shelley Mayer, Amy Paulin, Gary Pretlow, Jamal Bailey, Peter Harcum, Tom Avenatti. These have all people who have claimed to care about this issue. In fact, I went in 2015 when that methodology study came out and met with Shelley Mayer and met with Gary Pretlow and laid out what was going to happen. And nothing was done. Nothing was done. So here are some suggestions. So affect change. Don't just talk about affecting change. There's no reason why Westchester County should be reimbursed at a lower rate than New York City and Long Island. And even worse, Westchester County would reimburse providers who come in and work in Westchester at a higher rate than small businesses who are native to Westchester. It's very, very disturbing that that exists. 2, raise the pre-K SEIT rates and standardize cost of living adjustments. You see how out of whack the system is. That methodology study did tremendous damage. 3, remove subject to the approval of the director of the budget from the education law. It's inappropriate and it should be removed. 4, let preschool and, by the way, the K through 12 non-publics who are most often profoundly impaired students who are segregated socially into separate schools. Their education is woefully underfunded. At least let these employees enter the New York State retirement system the way all of the players up here, right? All of these individuals are all in the New York State pension system, but the people who serve students, most vulnerable students in our society, are locked out of it. Thank you.